Lishana Tova. Do you notice the pictures behind me? Take a look at these first four. Notice what they look like. They're smiling. They're happy. It's diversity. These are different people. All four of them lost their lives this year in a variety of ways. But they lost their lives because of racist attitudes and hatred. The little boy at the top, his name is Ali Dawabshi. He died in a fire set by Jewish extremists in a Palestinian home. He was 18 months old. Up here, Taiwanza Sanders. He died in a shooting in the Charleston church shooting, all because he came to Bible that night. And this African-American woman, Sandra Bland, she was stopped by police officers and taken to jail, and later found she had hung herself in her jail cell. And this young woman, Shira Banky, she was killed during the Tel Aviv Gay Pride Parade this year, stabbed to death by a fundamentalist. Now, what about these four? These four on this side. Notice what they look like. Again, they're smiling, they're happy. All four of them are Jewish. All four of them have experienced prejudice and anti-Semitism. Up at the top, Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, who is the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue in New York City. And then there's Adam Levine, Maroon 5, who with his tattoos I'm sure had prejudice. And down below, two young women, Courtney and Paige, they are sisters. They grew up in my former congregation. They've experienced prejudice in the Jewish community, but they have made tremendous contributions to the Jewish community at the Shore, Greater Philadelphia. Paige, the older one, was named Chapter of the Year for USY in Hagesha region. And Courtney is the USY advisor in Arizona. All of these individuals experienced racism and bigotry. And when we first looked at them, we identified them not by their faith, but by their external characteristics. We looked at their external factors. So why did these people have to die? They died because of racism and bigotry. They live in fear because they are considered to be other. And society has only reinforced the fear of the other by categorizing and denigrating the other. And today, the distinction between the fear of harm coming to us and bigotry has been blurred to such an extent that we no longer know the difference. In January 1963, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel spoke at a conference on race and religion. Rabbi Heschel told his audience, at the first conference on race and religion, the main participants were Pharaoh and Moshe. Moses said to Pharaoh, "Let my people go so that we can offer a celebration feast to God." Pharaoh retorted, "I don't know who this God is, and I will not let the people go." The outcome of that summit meeting has not come to an end. Pharaoh is not ready to capitulate. The Exodus has begun, but is far from having been completed. And as Rabbi Heschel said, it was far easier for the children of Israel to cross the Red Sea than for a Negro to cross certain university campuses. He said, "Let us dodge no issues. Let us yield no inch to bigotry. Let us make no compromise with callousness." And more than 50 years later, we continue to dodge the issues. We seem to yield to bigotry and are callous to both language and action which harms others. And while there are some who do it intentionally, many of us, including myself, do it unintentionally. And when we realize, we try to adjust our understandings and our meaning. But really, the more important step is next, to actively work not to be a racist and to ensure those around us are not either. Years ago, sitting at my Passover Seder table, my grandmother and Sharon's grandmother were having this conversation. And I started to hear, I couldn't believe what they started to say. They were talking to each other, and they were talking about Schwarzes. Now, I know my grandmothers to be good people, and I let it go because they were raised in an age where the use of terms like Schwarzes and worse were part of the daily language, and no one thought any differently. Rabbi Heschel once wrote, "Few are guilty, all are responsible." All of us are responsible for the hatred, the bigotry, and the prejudice that exists today. And while I don't think my grandmothers were racist, I don't think they knew the difference either. I don't think someone knows they are being racist when they're trying to Jew someone down, or gyp someone out, for that matter, or when we call a non-Jewish girl a shiksa, nor the Jewish summer camper who asked Shoshana Naor Rishon, a columnist for the online Jewish magazine Tablet, whether or not she was Jewish because of her dark skin. So many of us characterize the other, and we make an immediate decision about the person just from that very first look. And much of the time, we unintentionally look at someone and see them as less than. We have become callous to those who are different from us. And when we see horrific events like fanatics setting fire to a Palestinian home, where a small baby loses his life, or the devastating shooting in Charleston, where 9 people lost their lives all because they decided to study Bible together, and a young man walked in, sat down with them for an hour, and then pulled out a gun and shot them in cold blood because of his racist and bigoted beliefs. We have security at our front door because we are worried that someone may attack us on this, our most religiously significant day. Will we ever truly be able to open our doors and let all who wish to enter and live peacefully with us? What has changed since these horrific events of hatred and bigotry? A year has gone by since Ferguson. What's different? After the shooting in Charleston, E.J. Dionne, the Washington Post columnist, wrote an article called "Charleston and the Politics of Evasion." His premise is that we are great at whining and complaining. We're great at creating solidarity rallies in the aftermath of an event. But he wrote, millions of words will be written and spoken about the victims of Charleston. We'll deal with everything except the need to change. And I think he's right. Since Rabbi Heschel spoke at that conference on race and religion, much has changed in our society. No one can prevent another from voting. We have legislation that guarantees civil rights, and there are no longer separate water fountains for whites and coloreds. And yet, racism and bigotry still exist. It's found in the way that people respond one to another. It's unintentionally built into our history, and perhaps the fear of someone who looks different or acts differently from us. What was once explicit, today is implicit in some places. Can we picture a society where all people, regardless of race, ethnicity, and religion, are treated with respect and compassion and dignity? Can we be the catalyst for that change? Or will we continue to evade the issues? The purpose of these Yamim Noraim are to create a change in ourselves which help us become better individuals who show more love and compassion for others. Our 10 Commandments are our guide to how we should behave. Will we follow them? To truly change our society for the better, we have to change our ingrained attitudes on all sides. When we see a group of black men, do we subconsciously fear for our safety? And if we see someone in a hijab or Muslim garb, are we immediately suspicious? The answer is probably yes. Do we have reason to be fearful and suspicious? Yes. It's become an automatic response. It's become a response because of our cultural experience and our knowledge, even if it isn't intentional. At the same time, we explicitly teach that we live in a pluralistic society and community, and that we should rally together in solidarity against hatred and bigotry, just as we saw solidarity rallies immediately following the Charleston shooting, or in the streets of Tel Aviv to protest the death of Ali Dawabshi, the little boy, and Shira Benki, the young girl who attended the gay pride parade. These ingrained attitudes and learned values create an internal tension for us, which says we are excited that the Supreme Court struck down the Defense of Marriage Act and that same-sex couples can now marry, but we hope to God my child is straight. The internal tension that we feel makes it even more difficult to overcome our unintended bigotry. When does that change? It changes when we are intentional. It's not enough to convince ourselves that we aren't racists. It's not enough to say that everyone is equal and should be treated equally, because we have hundreds, perhaps thousands of years of discrimination to overcome. Instead, we must be thoughtful and intentional to see every person, no matter who they are, through the lens of being created, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Rabbi Yaakov Yosef of Polnoy in 1780 wrote in his book Toldot Yaakov Yosef that we should have compassion for all. And when we see something ugly or unbecoming in another person, we should turn our hearts to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, to the Holy One that dwells there, because no place is devoid of God. And by recognizing the ugliness in ourselves, it will turn our hearts, and we will be able to do tshuva, repentance. Toldot Yaakov Yosef teaches us that viewing people through the negative lens of stereotypes is a violation of the core principle that each person is uniquely created B'Tselem Elohim, uniquely created in God's image, and each has a unique worth. Instinctively, we judge others, and we use their flaws to build ourselves up. Toldot Yaakov Yosef teaches us that when we turn ourselves from judging, we turn ourselves towards kavod, towards honor and respect. When we fully embrace the midah of kavod, the characteristic of honor and respect, we gain self-confidence, we seek. But that can be employed either to destroy others or to strengthen those we encounter. For example, think about when you walked in today and you judged what I looked like. Or perhaps you judged my weight compared to when you met me last year for the first time. And if anyone's counting, I'm down a couple of pounds. Or perhaps you looked at someone's skirt or their shoes. You would probably never say anything to anyone, not even to yourself. But you made that judgment because you wanted to intentionally build yourself up. Give yourself confidence by judging other people's flaws. It's not enough for us to feel the honor. We must actively share the kavod with others. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua taught, "Let the honor of your student be as dear to you as your own, and the honor of your colleague be as the reverence for your rabbi, and the reverence for your rabbi as the reverence of heaven." If we are to practice kavod, we are to greet others, even strangers, as old friends. If we are to practice kavod, we should talk about creating a pluralistic society and then do so. As Martin Luther King taught in his famous I Have a Dream speech, to create a stronger society, we need to look at the merit of one's abilities and not the color of their skin. I take it a bit further to say that when we judge another, may we judge them for their actions and for their abilities and not for their race, their nationality, or their ethnicity. The moment we do that, the moment we judge people only on their merit and ability, is the moment we end racism. And we become stronger as a people and as a nation. Once upon a time, there was a monastery, and it had fallen on hard times. Formerly, its many buildings were filled with young monks, but now it was all but deserted. People no longer came from near and far to be nourished by the prayer, and only a handful of monks served God, and they did so with heavy hearts. On the edge of the monastery woods, an old rabbi built a little hut. He would come there from time to fast and to pray. No one ever spoke with him, but whenever he appeared, the word would be passed from monk to monk. The rabbi walks in the woods, and for as long as he was there, the monks would feel sustained by his prayerful presence. One day, the abbot decided to visit the rabbi and open his heavy heart to him. And so after the morning Eucharist, he set out through the woods. And as he approached the hut, the abbot saw the rabbi standing in the doorway with his arms wide open as if awaiting the abbot's arrival. And they embraced like long-lost brothers. The two entered the hut, where in the middle of the room stood a wooden table with the scriptures open. They sat for a moment in the presence of the book. And then the rabbi began to weep. And the abbot could not contain himself. He covered his face with his hands and he began to cry. And for the first time in his life, he cried his heart out. And the two men sat there like lost children, filling the hut with their shared pain and their tears. But soon the tears ceased and all was quiet. And the rabbi lifted his head. And he said, "You and your brothers are serving God with heavy hearts. And you've come to ask a teaching of me. And I will give you a teaching. But you can repeat it only once. After that, no one must ever say it aloud again." And the rabbi looked straight at the abbot and said, "The Messiah is among you." For a while, all was silent, and the rabbi then said, "Now you must go." And the abbot, he left without a word. He did not look back. And the next morning, the abbot called his monks together in the chapter room. He told them he had received a teaching from the rabbi who walks in the woods, and that teaching was never again to be spoken aloud. And then he looked at the group assembled, and he said to his brothers, "The rabbi said, the Messiah is among you." The monks were startled by this saying. What could it mean, they asked themselves. Is brother John the Messiah? Is brother Matthew the Messiah? Or perhaps brother Thomas? Perhaps I'm the Messiah. What could all this mean? And they were deeply puzzled. And no one ever mentioned the rabbi's teaching again. And as time went by, the monks, they began to treat one another with a new and very special reverence. A gentle, warm-hearted concern began to grow among them, which was hard to describe, but very easy to notice. And they began to live with each other as people who had finally found that special something they were looking for. And as they continued to pray together, they found something special. When visitors came to the monastery, they found themselves deeply moved by the life of these monks. Word spread, and before long, people began coming from near and wide to be nourished by the experience of the loving reverence in which they held each other. Soon, there were young men asking to join the community, and the community grew and prospered. In those days, the rabbi no longer walked in the woods. His hut had fallen into ruins. Yet somehow, the old monks who had taken his teaching to heart still felt sustained by his wise and prayerful presence. Look at these pictures again. These four people lost their lives. We lost their contributions to this world. And look at these four people. Rabbi Buchtal, Adam Levine, Courtney, and Paige. Each of them is contributing to the Jewish community and to the larger community in significant ways. We can overcome hatred and bigotry, and we can even overcome anti-Semitism when we make the intentional effort to turn ourselves from the ugliness we might think we see in another and turn ourselves to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, to the Holy One, blessed be God. It doesn't take monumental efforts, just a small turn. When our instincts for us are to be fearful of another, when we pass someone in the street, instead of being fearful, smile and nod. When we hire someone for a job, make the extra effort to hire someone who has the best qualifications, not because they look like me. And when we are making quick judgments of another, stop. Notice how we're using our criteria. And when someone makes a joke or a comment or uses inappropriate language about another, let them know it's not acceptable. And at the end of the day, we are all in this world together. And when each of us adds something unique and significant to our community, we will, together, make this world free of fear and full of goodness. May 5776 be a year where all of us work together, making our significant contributions to this world, so that this world will be free from fear and only full of goodness. Amen. L'shana Tova.